Life doesn't care about your complaints. The weather doesn't change because you forgot your umbrella. The market doesn't rise because your investments are down. The traffic doesn't clear because you're running late. But here's what I've learned after decades of studying success and failure. Winners don't waste energy complaining about the rain. They build better umbrellas. The world rewards people who adapt, not those who complain. That's a simple truth that separates those who achieve remarkable things from those who remain stuck in a cycle of frustration and blame. I want to talk to you today about this fundamental difference that shapes every aspect of your life. Look around you right now. Every single person faces challenges. Every single one. The difference isn't in who has problems and who doesn't. The difference is in how people respond to those problems. Some people get knocked down by the wind. Others learn to adjust their sails. I remember talking with a gentleman who lost everything in his business. Everything. His first store, his savings, his credit, gone. He told me, I spent 6 months complaining about how unfair it was, how the economy had changed, how the big stores had moved in and crushed me. Then he paused and said something profound. And then one morning, I realized all my complaining hadn't put a single dollar back in my pocket or opened a single door. That morning changed everything for him. Instead of complaining, he started adapting. He looked at what the big stores couldn't do well. He found a niche they couldn't serve. 5 years later, he had 3 specialty shops doing better than his original business ever did. That's the power of adaptation versus complaint. One leads nowhere, the other leads everywhere. Now let's talk about the fundamental mindset difference between winners and complainers. It starts with how they view the world. Complainers see the world as something happening to them. Winners see the world as something responding to them. And see, why is this happening to me? When a winner faces that same obstacle, they ask, what can I do about this? Notice the difference. One question leads to victimhood. The other leads to action. Complainers believe circumstances control their lives. Winners believe they influence their circumstances. The complainer says that's just the way things are. The winner asks, how can I make things better? This mindset difference affects everything. It affects how you respond to criticism. The complainer gets defensive. The winner looks for the valuable feedback hidden in the criticism. It affects how you handle unexpected change. The complainer resists and resents it. The winner looks for the opportunity within it. I've watched this play out thousands of times with people from all walks of life. The factory worker who loses his job after 20 years. The store owner facing new competition. The salesperson dealing with changing customer preferences. The entrepreneur facing a dramatic shift in technology. Things used to be better. It's not fair. Someone should do something, the winners tell a different story. Things have changed. Here's what I'm going to do about it. Here's how I'll create value in this new reality. And here's what's fascinating. The circumstances are identical. The only difference is the response. I remember a lady who attended one of my seminars years ago. She approached me afterward and said, I've been complaining for 3 years about my job. Today I realized something. My complaints haven't changed my job, but they've certainly changed me. They've robbed me of 3 years of happiness and growth. That's wisdom. The cost of complaining is enormous, but we rarely calculate it properly. When you complain, you reinforce your powerlessness. Each complaint is like a brick in a wall that separates you from your potential. Each time you say, there's nothing I can do, you make it true. Not because it is true, but because you believe it. Complainers suffer twice. First from the circumstance itself, then from their emotional reaction to it. They pay compound interest on their problems. But those who adapt, they may suffer once from the circumstance, but then they reclaim their power. They say, I can't control what happened, but I can control what happens next. And in that moment, they transform from victim to creator. The cost of complaining extends beyond your emotional state. It affects your relationships. Nobody enjoys spending time with chronic complainers. It drains energy from rooms. It pushes away opportunity. Who wants to offer new possibilities to someone who can only see what's wrong with their current situation? Let me tell you something powerful. Adaptation attracts opportunity. When people see you adapting, finding solutions, creating new paths. They want to help you. They want to join you. They want to learn from you. I knew a young man who lost his job during an economic downturn. Instead of complaining, he asked himself, what skills do I have that are still valuable? What needs exist that aren't being met? He started a small service business from his garage, helping people maintain their homes when they couldn't afford major renovations. Within 2 years, he was employing 5 people. Within 5 years, he had a company doing better than any job he could have found. Was it easy? Of course not. Did he have moments of frustration? Absolutely, but he didn't spend his energy complaining about what was lost. He invested that energy in building what could be. I've met people who have faced circumstances far worse than most of us will ever experience. Some became bitter, some became better. The difference wasn't in what happened to them. It was in what they decided to do about what happens. Personal responsibility means sane. Life may not be fair, but my job isn't to complain about that unfairness. My job is to become strong enough, creative enough, and determined enough to build a good life anyway. When you take personal responsibility, you stop asking, who's going to fix this for me? And start asking, how can I begin to fix this for myself? That shift changes everything. It puts you back in the driver's seat of your life. I remember talking with a small business owner during a difficult economic period. He told me I spent weeks blaming the economy, blaming the government, blaming the banks. And you know what? I was right about all of it. The situation was unfair, but being right didn't pay my bills or keep my employees working. What changed for him? He accepted responsibility for finding a solution, even though he hadn't created the problem. He said, I realized I couldn't control the economy, but I could control my response to it. I couldn't change interest rates, but I could change my business model. That's the essence of personal responsibility. It's not about taking blame. It's about taking control of what you can control. Your actions, your attitudes, your response. And here's what happens when you embrace personal responsibility. You stop feeling helpless. You reclaim your power. You start seeing options where before you only saw obstacles. Personal responsibility is like turning on the lights in a dark room. The obstacles don't disappear, but suddenly you can see ways around them, over them, or through them. Without personal responsibility, you're just stumbling in the dark, bumping into things and complaining that someone should fix the electricity. Now, I want to talk about something important. Adaptability is a skill, not a trait. You aren't born adaptable or inflexible. You develop adaptability through practice and intention. Think about it like physical fitness. Some people might have natural advantages, but anyone can become more fit through consistent training. Adaptability works the same way. You build it by exercising certain mental and emotional muscles. The first muscle is curiosity. Adaptable people are curious people. When they encounter change, their first response is, I wonder what possibilities this creates. Not hate that things are different. Cultivate curiosity by asking better questions. Instead of why is this happening, ask what can I learn from this? Instead of who's to blame, ask what's the next step I can take. The second muscle is perspective. Adaptable people can zoom out from their immediate frustration to see the bigger picture. They understand that most obstacles look smaller when viewed from a distance. You strengthen perspective by regularly stepping back from your problems. Ask yourself, will this matter in a year? In 5 years? What's the worst that could happen, and could I handle that? What opportunities might this create that I can't see right now? The third muscle is experimentation. Adaptable people are willing to try new approaches. They don't insist that there's only one right way to do things. When circumstances change, they change their methods. Develop this muscle by deliberately trying new approaches, even when the old ones still work. Ask yourself regularly, is there a better way to do this? Even when things are going well, experiment with improvements. The fourth muscle is resilience. Adaptable people recover quickly from setbacks. They don't expect every attempt to succeed, and they don't take failure personally. Build resilience by starting with small challenges and working your way up. Celebrate your efforts, not just your successes. Learn to separate your identity from your outcomes. I met a gentleman who'd been in manufacturing for 30 years. His industry changed dramatically with new technology and global competition. He told me, at first I was the biggest complainer. I kept saying things like, this isn't how we do things, and these changes will never work. What changed for him? He decided to deliberately strengthen his adaptability muscles. He started taking classes to learn the new technology. He began asking younger colleagues for their perspectives. He experimented with new approaches. It wasn't comfortable, he told me, but I realized comfort was less important than survival. And eventually, what felt uncomfortable became my new normal. That's how adaptability works. What feels foreign today becomes familiar tomorrow. But you have to be willing to endure that initial discomfort. You have to be willing to be bad at something new instead of good at something outdated. Now, let's talk about overcoming obstacles through adaptation. Every worthwhile achievement comes with obstacles. The path to success isn't a straight line. It's a series of adjustments. The difference between those who succeed and those who fail isn't the absence of obstacles. It's their response to those obstacles. When you hit an obstacle, you have three choices. You can give up, you can keep doing the same thing, hoping for different results, or you can adapt. Only one of these choices leads to progress. I've studied success for decades, and I've never seen anyone achieve anything significant without adapting their approach multiple times along the way. Let me share a powerful framework for adaptation when facing obstacles. I call it the 4 A's: acknowledge, assess, adjust, and act again. First, acknowledge the reality of your situation. Don't minimize it. Don't exaggerate it. See it clearly. Many people fail at adaptation because they're adapting to a situation that exists only in their minds, not in reality. Say to yourself, this is where I am right now. Not where I want to be, not where I plan to be, but where I am. That honest acknowledgement is the foundation of effective adaptation. Second, assess your options. What resources do you have? What skills can you deploy? What help can you enlist? What approaches haven't you tried? The quality of your assessment determines the quality of your adaptation. Remember, there are always more options than you initially see. Always. Train yourself to look beyond the obvious. Third, adjust your approach based on your assessment. Choose the most promising option and modify your plan accordingly. Don't be afraid to make significant changes if that's what the situation requires. Many people make only minor adjustments when major ones are needed. They change their tactics when they should be changing their strategy. Be willing to make fundamental shifts when necessary. Fourth, act again with your new approach. Implementation is where most adaptations fail. People think about adapting, talk about adapting, plan to adapt, but they don't actually do anything differently. Action is the test of adaptation. Without action, it's just an idea. I remember talking with a salesperson who had been successful for years. Suddenly, his numbers dropped dramatically. He told me, I kept making more calls, working longer hours, pushing harder, but nothing changed. His breakthrough came when he realized he needed to apply the 4 A's. He acknowledged that the market had fundamentally changed. He assessed his options and realized he needed to completely revamp his approach. He adjusted by learning new skills and developing new offerings. And then, this is crucial, he acted again with his new approach. Within 6 months, he was outperforming his previous best years. The obstacles hadn't disappeared. He had adapted to them. That's the power of this framework. It gives you a structured way to adapt rather than simply reacting emotionally to obstacles. Now, here's something important to understand. Adaptation isn't just about surviving challenges. It's about creating opportunities from change. Every significant change in circumstances creates new possibilities. The most successful people have trained themselves to look for these opportunities while others are busy complaining about the changes. Think about major technological shifts. Some people complained about how these changes disrupted their comfortable routines. Others asked, what new needs will this create? What problems will this solve? What opportunities does this present? The ability to see opportunity in change is perhaps the most valuable skill you can develop in today's rapidly evolving world. It transforms you from a victim of change to a beneficiary of it. How do you develop this skill? Start by asking better questions when faced with change. Instead of, how does this hurt me? Ask, where is the opportunity in this? Instead of, why is this happening? Ask, how can I use this? I knew a small retailer who faced devastating competition when a major chain moved to town. Most of the other small retailers complained bitterly, and many eventually closed. But this one store owner asked different questions. Instead of asking, how can I compete with their prices? A battle he couldn't win. He asked, what can I offer that they fundamentally cannot? He transformed his business into a high-touch, personalized shopping experience with expert advice and community events. 5 years later, his business was thriving while the big chain had actually scaled back its local operations. He told me the big store moving in was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to stop being a mediocre version of them and start being an excellent version of myself. That's the mindset that transforms change from threat to opportunity. It's not about positive thinking or ignoring reality. It's about looking at the same reality from a different angle, seeing the possibilities within the challenge. Every change creates voids that someone will fill. Every problem needs solutions that someone will provide. Every disruption creates new needs that someone will satisfy. Why not you? I want to talk now about daily habits that build adaptability. Like any skill, adaptability strengthens with consistent practice. You can't expect to be rigid and inflexible most of the time, then suddenly adapt when a crisis hits. Adaptability is built through daily choices and habits. Here are some powerful practices that develop your adaptation muscles. First, regularly step outside your comfort zone. Do something each week that feels unfamiliar. Take a different route to work. Try a new food. Talk to someone you wouldn't normally engage with. Read a book on a subject you know nothing about. These small stretches train your mind to handle novelty and uncertainty. They teach you that different doesn't mean dangerous. Second, practice mental flexibility with what-if scenarios. Regularly ask yourself, what if my assumptions are wrong? What if the opposite of what I believe is true? What if I had to achieve this goal in half the time or with half the resources? This mental exercise prevents you from becoming too attached to one way of thinking. It keeps your mind nimble and open to alternatives. Third, seek diverse perspectives deliberately. Talk with people who think differently than you do. Read authors you tend to disagree with. Consider viewpoints from different cultures, generations, and backgrounds. This habit prevents the echo chamber effect that reinforces rigid thinking. It shows you that there are many valid ways to view the same situation. Fourth, build margin into your life. Adaptation requires resources, mental, emotional, financial, and temporal. If you're running at 100 audacity all the time, you have no room to adapt when circumstances change. Create breathing room in your schedule, your finances, and your mental bandwidth. This margin gives you the flexibility to respond to change without going into crisis mode. Fifth, reflect regularly on your responses to challenges. After facing a difficulty, ask yourself, how effectively did I adapt? What could I have done differently? What did I learn that will help me next time? This reflective practice accelerates your growth and adaptability. It turns each challenge into a learning opportunity. I knew a business leader who practiced what he called adaptation rehearsals with his team. Once a quarter, they would imagine a major disruption to their industry and spend a day working through how they would respond. When real disruptions came, as they inevitably did, his team was psychologically prepared to adapt while competitors were still in shock. These habits might seem simple, even obvious, but their power comes from consistency. Small daily choices compound over time into remarkable capabilities. Speaking of the compound effect, let's talk about how adaptation compounds over time. Like interest in a bank account, the benefits of adaptation don't just add up. They multiply. When you adapt effectively to one challenge, You develop capabilities that make you better equipped for the next challenge. You build confidence in your ability to handle change. You collect insights and strategies that become part of your toolbox. Over time, this creates an exponential difference between adaptable people and rigid people. It's like two investment accounts with different interest rates. At first, the difference seems small, but after years, the gap becomes enormous. I've watched people who start with similar talents and opportunities end up in completely different places based largely on their adaptability. 20 years of effective adaptation versus 20 years of resistance and complaint creates entirely different lives. But think about your own experience. Consider the adaptations you've made in the past that seemed difficult at the time, but now feel natural. Remember how each adaptation made the next one a little easier. That's the compound effect at work. The adaptability you develop today isn't just for today's challenges. It's an investment in your capacity to handle all future challenges. And here's something powerful. As your adaptability compounds, your fear diminishes. What once seemed threatening now looks like an interesting puzzle to solve. What once provoked anxiety now triggers curiosity. I've known people who transform from being terrified of change to actually seeking it out, not because they became reckless, but because they developed such confidence in their ability to adapt. One gentleman told me, "I used to pray nothing would change. Now I just pray for the wisdom to handle whatever changes come." That shift in perspective is freedom. It's the freedom that comes from knowing you can adapt to whatever life brings. The compound effect of adaptation also shows up in opportunities. Adaptable people get offered more opportunities precisely because they've demonstrated they can handle change. People trust them with new projects, new responsibilities, and new challenges. This creates a virtuous cycle. More opportunities lead to more growth, which leads to greater adaptability, which leads to even more opportunities. There's another dimension to this compound effect worth considering. When you consistently choose adaptation over complaint, you develop what I call adaptation intuition. This is the ability to sense which adaptations will be most effective before you fully analyze the situation. It's like what happens to a master chess player, where a beginner sees individual moves. The master sees patterns. Where others see chaos, the adaptable person sees familiar challenges in new clothing. This intuition doesn't develop overnight. It comes from years of choosing adaptation, learning from the results, and building a mental library of what works. But once you have it, it becomes one of your most valuable assets. You can navigate change with a wisdom that others find remarkable. I remember talking with a woman who had built several successful businesses across completely different industries. I asked her how she managed to succeed in fields where she initially had no experience. She said, "I have learned that most problems, regardless of the industry, follow similar patterns. The details change, but the underlying dynamics don't. My first adaptation in a new field might take weeks. My 10th takes days. My 100th happens almost automatically." That's the compound effect of adaptation, creating something that looks like magic to others, but is simply the result of consistent practice. Another powerful aspect of the compound effect is how it influences those around you. Your adaptability doesn't exist in isolation. When you model effective adaptation, you create permission for others to adapt as well. I've seen entire families, companies, and communities transformed because key individuals refused to complain and instead demonstrated the power of adaptation. Their example created a new standard that others began to follow. One business leader told me, "The best thing I ever did for my company wasn't any strategic decision. It was showing my team how to adapt to changing market conditions without fear or blame." Now that mindset has become part of our culture. We don't waste time complaining about changes. We immediately start looking for ways to turn them to our advantage. So what's the practical takeaway? Invest in your adaptability every day, knowing that you're not just solving today's problems. You're building capacity for all future challenges. You're creating compound interest on your most valuable assets. your ability to thrive in changing conditions, and you're influencing everyone around you to do the same. As we come to the close of our time together, I want to leave you with this thought. The choice between complaining and adapting isn't just a choice about how you handle difficulties. It's a choice about who you become. Every time you choose adaptation over complaint, you strengthen that pathway in your mind. You become incrementally but inevitably a different kind of person, someone who faces reality with courage, creativity, and determination. And here's the beautiful thing. This choice is available to you at any moment. No matter how long you've been complaining, no matter how stuck you've felt, you can choose adaptation right now. You can say, this is where I am, and from this moment forward, I am looking for ways to adapt and grow. That decision changes everything. It puts you back in the driver's seat of your life. It transforms you from victim to creator. So I challenge you today. Make that choice consciously. The next time you feel the urge to complain about a circumstance, stop yourself and ask instead, how can I adapt to this? What can I learn from this? Where's the opportunity in this? That simple pivot will set you on a different trajectory. And if you make it consistently, day after day, it will lead you to a different destination entirely. Let me share something powerful with you. The most successful people I've ever met don't just adapt when forced to. They proactively seek situations that require adaptation. They understand that comfort is the enemy of growth. They deliberately put themselves in situations where they have to stretch, learn, and develop new capabilities. They take on challenges that seem beyond their current abilities. They volunteer for projects that require skills they haven't fully developed yet. They start businesses in areas where they'll need to learn quickly. They surround themselves with people who think differently than they do. Why would anyone choose discomfort on purpose? Because they understand that the greatest growth happens at the edge of your capabilities, not in the center of your comfort zone. They understand that adaptability is like a muscle that needs regular challenges to grow stronger. I want you to consider, where in your life are you avoiding necessary adaptation? Where are you choosing the familiar over the effective? Where are you holding onto approaches that no longer serve you simply because they're comfortable? These are tough questions, but they're the questions that lead to growth. They're the questions that winners ask themselves regularly. And here's a powerful truth: adaptation, instead of waiting for circumstances to force it upon you, you experience it differently. What feels like an unwelcome disruption when forced upon you can feel like an exciting opportunity when freely chosen. The same adaptation that feels like loss when resisted feels like growth when embraced. The difference isn't in what you're doing, it's in how you're approaching it. I knew a woman who worked in an industry undergoing massive technological change. While her colleagues complained and resisted each new system, she took a different approach. Every time a new technology was introduced, she volunteered to be on the implementation team. She became known as someone who could bridge the old and new ways of working. About this choice, she said something profound. I realized early on that these changes were inevitable. I could experience them as a series of unwelcome disruptions, or I could use them as a series of growth opportunities. Same changes, completely different experience. That's the mindset I want for you. Not just adaptation as a response to difficulty, but adaptation as a pathway to growth. Not just adaptation as a necessity, but adaptation as an opportunity. Remenders don't complain, they adapt. And that adaptation isn't just about what they achieve. It's about who they become in the process. It's about the lives they build, the example they set, the legacy they leave. You have that choice before you every day. Choose adaptation, choose growth. Choose to be the kind of person who turns obstacles into opportunities, challenges into capabilities, and changes into chances. The quality of your future depends not on what happens to you, but on how you respond to what happens. And that response is always your choice. I want to leave you with one final thought. Years from now, you'll look back on your life's journey. You'll see the challenges you faced, the changes that came your way, the difficulties that seemed insurmountable at the time. And what will matter most isn't how many of those challenges you avoided. It's how you responded to the ones you couldn't avoid. Did you waste precious time and energy complaining about them? Or did you adapt, grow, and ultimately thrive because of them? Did you let circumstances define you, or did you define yourself by how you responded to circumstances? Your legacy won't be built on perfect conditions. It will be built on how you adapted to imperfect ones. Your success won't come from having fewer problems than others. It will come from solving the problems you have more effectively. So embrace adaptation as a way of life, not just as an occasional necessity. See it as your competitive advantage in a world where change is the only constant. Make it your default response rather than your last resort, because winners don't complain. They adapt. And by choosing adaptation over complaint day after day and year after year, you join their rank. Thank you.